Simon, 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 son of John, do you love me?
Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you.
Then you must tend my sheep. Truly I say to you, when you were young, you dressed yourself and went where you wished. But when you grow old, someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not wish to go.
I remember, Lord.
Who are you, Lord?
I am Jesus.
I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith.
I will kill them and their God.
Burn them all.
In the 30 years following Jesus' ministry, the faith of the crucified one spread like wildfire across the empire. Far from the dust of Judea, his very own apostles took the message straight to Rome, the beating heart of the world's greatest empire. Rome, more than anywhere else, is seen as the historical seat of Peter and the home of Paul's greatest theological treatise, the Epistle to the Romans. But their rise in the city defied the odds, essentially a grassroots movement from the slums and prisons to the private homes of generous patrons. Small colonies of Jesus people established camps on foreign soil. What followed in the wake of Christianity in Rome can only be described as a cosmic clash, a struggle against principalities, powers, and the lofty thoughts enthroned in the high places of society. Rome was ground zero for what happens when the lordship of Jesus challenges the dominion of the imperium. The heavens, the powers, and Rome itself caught fire. These two worlds collided on July 18th, 64 AD. Rome was tragically consumed in fire. Shrines to the gods, markets, and the great Circus Maximus all burned down. 2/3 of the city lost in smoke and ash, a man-made apocalypse.
Who could have done this?
The historian Tacitus, who lived through the fire as a child, documents that some citizens tried to stop the blaze, only to be turned away by strange figures in authority. Others swore that they saw men hurling torches into the streets, deliberately stoking the flames. Rumors quickly spread that a fire of this size was no accident at all, but chaos by design, a dark cleansing ordered by the state. Tacitus himself suspected as much, noting how the Emperor Nero immediately unveiled grand new construction plans, even while the embers still burned in Rome. On conveniently cleared prime real estate, Nero would build up his golden house, a palace of immense luxury and pleasure, crowned by a colossal statue of his own image. No one could say with certainty who started the fire, but public hysteria demanded answers from the government. The Romans petitioned Nero for a formal response, but as he was desperate to clear his own name of suspicion, he seized control of the narrative instead. And among all possible scapegoats, senators or even slaves, he instead chose a small, defiant sect of citizens to bear the burden of blame: the Christians.
They started it.
It was them!
Tacitus writes that these accused Christians followed one Christus, a Judean man who was crucified under Pontius Pilate during the reign of Tiberius. Yet his followers insisted, to this day, that Christus was alive, and that he is the Son of God, and that he is Lord. These royal titles were, for a Roman, direct challenges to the imperium, whose emperors claimed these same exclusive privileges. After Nero shifted the blame, Roman Christians were charged with a theological crime, the hatred of the human race, as Tacitus puts it. To Roman sensibilities, Christians were already virtually atheists, forsaking the traditional gods on whom Rome's fortunes depended. When disaster struck, it was customary to blame the impious, and so Nero reasoned. Who better to blame for Rome's destruction than this small sect that publicly rejected the gods? And so began history's first great persecution. Christians were arrested, torn apart by beasts, and burned alive as crucified human torches. While Nero entertained his guests in the gardens, the glow of their burning provided him evening light. At the heart of this fiery crucible stood the influence of the two great apostles, Peter, the shepherd of the dispersed Jews, and Paul, the great messenger to the Gentiles. Together, they bore witness throughout Rome that Christus was Lord, even reaching, as Paul claims, the very household of Caesar.
You dare bring this to my doorstep.
Through 3 decades of ministry, Peter and Paul had proclaimed the gospel to nearly every corner of the empire, from the slums of the insulae to the corridors of imperial power. Certainly, Nero had taken notice of the Christians, enough to see them as a threat, using this fire as the perfect excuse to eliminate them.
My brothers, do not be afraid of the fiery ordeal that comes upon you. It comes as a testing.
As persecution took hold of the church, deeper discernment began to take shape in its survivors, adopting apocalyptic language, most notably from John, the seer of Patmos and the author of the book of Revelation. There is good reason to believe that John's apocalyptic narrative immediately described the abuses of Nero, waging a cosmic war like a beast from Babylon, devouring the saints. Paul also had this idea in mind. He had once warned other churches outside of Rome of a man of lawlessness, a cryptic individual or force who would soon exalt himself above every so-called god and enthrone himself as divine. Considering the backdrop of the apocalyptic fire and the persecution that followed, many in the early church began to see these mysteries unveiled before their very eyes. The Antichrist of the first century was the emperor himself, and his thirst for blood and divinity would not be quenched until he had claimed the heads of Peter, Paul, and the Christus who led them.
Saul! Saul!
Who are you, Lord?
I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. But rise and enter Damascus. You will be told what you must do. For I will show him how much he must suffer for my name.
These words never left the mind of Saul of Tarsus, a proud Pharisee who had lost everything when he met the risen Christ on the road to Damascus. And yet he gained everything. Fiery zeal was turned into burning conviction, and the persecutor of the early church became its greatest promoter, leading to writings that now make up nearly half of the New Testament. In those early days, Paul withdrew into Arabia to wrestle with this staggering revelation. The crucified one was the Messiah, the very one he tried to destroy with all of his might. Paul prayed, fasted, and prepared for what this truth really meant for the world. Only a few years after this, Paul traveled to Jerusalem to seek out those who had known Jesus in the flesh, to establish a unity in message. Here he was received by none other than Peter, who had walked with Jesus daily, knew him better than anyone else, and was raising up new disciples in the way.
I remember you. You stood by in approval, as our brother Stephen was stoned to death for his testimony. Yes, you have heard of my previous life in Judaism. How intensely I persecuted the Church of God and tried to destroy it. I was so zealous for the traditions of my fathers. But when God, who set me apart and called me by his grace, was pleased to reveal his Son in me, it is enough for me. What do you want to know? Tell me everything from the beginning.
Now united in one faith and spirit, the apostles became an unstoppable force, the fisherman and the Pharisee. Together they forged the living bridge from Jerusalem to Rome, carrying the message of Christus with the spiritual weapons he had given them, the belt of truth, the shield of faith, the sword of the Spirit.
Brothers.
New Testament data strongly implies that Peter had a vested presence in the church at Corinth. and a self-authored letter gives encouragement to the churches in Asia Minor, inferring some kind of travel across the Mediterranean. Most mysterious, however, is Peter's salutation to the churches from Babylon, a common code word for Rome. From this, it is commonly argued that Peter ended his ministry there, where tradition states he dictated what became the Gospel of Mark. After this, Peter was arrested during Nero's persecution and was sentenced to death, crucified in the iconic upside-down orientation.
Simon, Simon,
receive my spirit, Lord.
While Paul had a similar trajectory to Peter, his numerous writings track his adventures in more places. In the Acts of the Apostles, written to describe the events directly after Jesus' earthly ministry, the final chapter concludes with Paul under house arrest in Rome, ostensibly waiting to appeal to Caesar under charges of sedition, a common Roman accusation for any citizen seen as threatening the peace. For a normal Roman, testimony before a tribunal would be frightening. But for Paul, this was destiny, one chance to preach the gospel to the most powerful man in the world. Paul's imprisonment in Rome is traditionally dated to 62 AD. While no dramatic showdown with Nero is recorded outside of pious legends, Paul's own words claim that his cause for imprisonment was known throughout the entire Praetorian Guard, essentially Nero's personal secret service or a private army. Combining this with Tacitus' previous account of the Great Fire in 64, the picture shows that Nero knew of Christian influence enough to seek its destruction. And with voices like Paul's making inroads even into the household of Caesar, as he claimed, it is likely the emperor feared the gospel's growing sway. The earliest reference to Paul's martyrdom comes from Clement of Rome, an early leader writing in 95 AD. In his own letter to the Corinthian church, he links Peter and Paul to common fates, both suffering martyrdom under the Roman authorities. But Paul's own words provide the clearest insight into his final witness. In his second letter to Timothy, Paul writes in the tone of an elder passing on the baton, standing in a place of victory.
I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day.
Unlike Peter, Paul was a Roman citizen who couldn't be crucified, or at least executed without a trial. The sword was his eventual end, beheaded between 64 and 67 AD, traditionally ordered at Nero's command. This shared martyrdom sealed their apostolic testimony in fire and blood, the very same apocalyptic language that the church would pick up when the next generation of Christians came to believe that Nero's actions earned him the unique title of the Antichrist. After a drastic mental decline, Nero died in 68 AD, abandoned by the Senate and cut off from all of his allies, condemned as an enemy of the state, and left to die alone. Despite his death, rumors quickly circulated that Nero had not truly perished, but had merely escaped to the east, intending to reclaim power in the future. Several imposters quickly emerged, claiming to be Nero reborn, exploiting the collective memory of his tyranny to gain followers. Tacitus also notes that coins bearing Nero's image continued to circulate and mint after his death, which may have reinforced the perception that Nero had survived. Christian communities interpreted and ran with these rumors in an eschatological context. The Book of Revelation encodes Nero's name numerically as 666, employing gematria, the assignment of numerical values to letters. In this cryptic system, Neron Kaiser, rendered in Hebrew characters, corresponds to 666, allowing John to reference a politically sensitive figure without naming him directly, while framing him symbolically as the ultimate enemy of the church.
Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. That number is 666.
This typology, viewing Nero as a proto-Antichrist, remained the prevailing interpretation within the church for several centuries. St. John Chrysostom, in his 4th century homily on 2 Thessalonians, explicitly identifies Nero as an archetype of the Antichrist, specifically drawing on Paul's warning regarding the man of lawlessness, the one who exalts himself above God. Chrysostom emphasizes that Nero's historical actions, tyranny, blasphemy, and the persecution of the faithful provided a concrete model for understanding the opposition to Christ and the Church. Early Christians therefore feared his potential bodily return at the end of time, where Nero would reappear as the ultimate adversary of Christ, inaugurating a final period of persecution and lawlessness before the end came. This became known as the Nero Redivivus legend, reinforcing this perception for centuries.
Have no fear, do you not know? I have overcome the world.
Yet despite his terror and the enduring shadow of his legend, Nero's attempts to destroy the church ultimately failed. The martyrdoms of Peter and Paul under his reign became foundational symbols of steadfast faith. From Peter's unwavering leadership to Paul's theological legacy, their impact quickly outpaced the emperor's, demonstrating that the power of Christ's message could not be extinguished by imperial violence. In Christian memory, Nero's life and his myth function as a warning. Tyranny and persecution are real and should be expected, but the faithful will endure, and the church will make it through the fire.